political parties are lining up on different sides of the gun control debate in the wake of two shootings in Texas and in Ohio. And I can tell you that I think that eventually you're going to see too much of an overcompensation from the gun control crowd. And I'll explain why. Yes, there is a larger degree of support for tighter laws among minority groups, the black and Hispanic groups, for gun control. That's something that I saw in a Pew Research survey from 2011, which was the most recent one I could find, although I'm sure that there could be some other ones. But I can tell you that Gallup's tracking data is showing that there is not as much of a support basis as there used to be for an assault weapons ban. Now, this is from 2018, October 1st. 57% were against it, and this was after the Parkland drama. The Parkland massacre, not to degrade it, but there was the whole campaign and the March for Our Lives and various people that were taking part in it. And that ended up actually eating away support for an assault weapons ban. And I would say, given the identity of the shooter from the Ohio shooting in Dayton, it's more than likely that this new push for gun control will actually drive more opposition here in Ohio, because the guy was far left. It's been acknowledged. I think even the Daily Mail acknowledged that he's an Elizabeth Warren supporter. And he also apparently was well known to law enforcement based on other threats that he had issued in the past, including ones that got him suspended from school. So I would say that in Texas, it's already a dead issue. Sorry, poor choice of words, but the idea that you're going to promote gun control based on the El Paso incident, when in Texas the culture is much stronger than here in Ohio, and it's pretty strong here in Ohio, is ludicrous. You're going to see a lot of these politicians. We had Sherrod Brown coming out in favor of more gun control, and he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I think that it's actually eating away, and he's lucky because he just got reelected last year. It's going to eat away into his support. That is going to be a long-term problem for him. A lot of union members are firearms owners, especially in the heartland counties like Mahoning and Lorain over here. So those people are not going to just say, well, I guess Sherrod Brown knows better than us. But we can also see here, and this is something that surprises me, because I am not exactly a big booster for the NRA, but in June of 2018, there was 28% having a very favorable opinion of the NRA, and 25% having a mostly favorable opinion, which gives them a majority. And then you have 16% mostly unfavorable, 26% very unfavorable. So you have a majority that are that essentially they're saying the NRA is good, and 42% have an unfavorable opinion. And I'm sure if you go to states like mine in the Midwest, the people who care about the NRA are steadily smaller. So we're talking about opinion polling here. We're not necessarily talking just about some of the other issues that are being brought up. There's this big debate right now about mental health and red flag laws and things like that. I think Trump even elicited he signaled support for red flag laws on a federal level. The red flag laws are not really going to work. Okay, the Parkland shooting was conducted by someone that was known by the FBI, somebody who had actually issued threats online, and he'd been reported to the FBI hotline, and the FBI did literally nothing. So I don't think a red flag law is going to really do anything unless we have an accounting, really an accounting for how the FBI has failed before, and for people to pay a penalty for it. The people who are supposed to be recognizing and dealing with the signals that are coming out don't necessarily care, because they appear to be more concerned with things that have nothing to do with anything remotely related to saving people's lives. And I'll say this, there was a hearing, I believe in the spring, where a lot of these Democrats were saying, how come there's no FBI research into white supremacists, and they've gotten rid of a lot of that. These people, they're no longer going to screwdriver concerts, shaving their heads, and running around and playing romper stomper in Korean supermarkets or whatever, bodegas, what have you. These are people, they are communicating peer to peer across the internet. In one case, you're talking about leftists, so we're not even talking about white supremacy. We're not talking about white nationalism in terms of the Dayton shooter. So what good would it do to study white supremacy? We might as well have a larger conversation, which is already a dangerous conversation, about recognizing political extremism in general. And then what are we going to do? Have a national registry of political extremists? That's really what the totalitarians in the Democratic and Republican parties are looking at. And at that point, I would say we would be shoving the public into a civil war at a difficult time for the country. And that's not going to make me want to give up my weapons. So we're going to hear from Beto, and we're going to see really what people who are angling for political office are using this incident for.
Yes. We've had a rise in hate crimes every single one of the last 3 years. During an administration where you have a president who's called Mexicans rapists and criminals, though Mexican immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than those born here in the country, he has tried to make us afraid of them to some real effect and consequence. Attempting to ban all Muslims from this country. The day that he signed that executive order, the mosque in Victoria, Texas was burned to the ground. Those chants that we heard in Greenville, North Carolina, send her back, talking about our fellow American citizens duly elected to represent their constituents in the Congress who happen to be women of color. He is a racist, and he stokes racism in this country, and it does not just offend our sensibilities, it fundamentally changes the character of this country, and it leads to violence. And again, there are still details that we are waiting on, but I'm just following the lead that I've heard from the El Paso Police Department, where they say there are strong indications that this shooter wrote that manifesto and that this was inspired by his hatred of people here in this community.
Now, police are still investigating to determine whether the suspect wrote the manifesto that O'Rourke mentioned. But let's talk about all of this now with Brian Levin. Brian, the director of the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism.
So forget this asshole. We're going to pull in a different clip of Beto. And sorry, but this is the Terrence Williams reaction, which is a little distracting, but nevertheless, this is really the clip that we were wanting to see.
Rapists and criminals. He's been calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals. I don't know, like, members of the press, what the hold on a second. You know, it's these questions that you know the answers to. I mean, connect the dots about what he's been doing in this country. He's not tolerating racism, he is promoting racism. He's not tolerating violence, he's inciting racism.
Who calls asylum seekers animals and an infestation. You may call a cockroach an infestation. You may use that word in the Third Reich to describe those who are undesirable, who must be put down because they are subhuman. You do not expect to hear that in the United States of America.
Boy, shut up, Beto. You are so fake and phony. Nothing about you is real. You are faker than a $3 bill, Robert Francis. Why are you using this tragedy?
So forget his reaction. First, we're gonna look at what he's doing.
What the? Hold on a second. You know, it's these questions that you know the answers to. I mean, connect the dots about what he's been doing in this country. He's not tolerating racism. He is promoting racism. He's not tolerating violence. He's inciting racism.
Who calls asylum seekers animals.
So the real issue, and you know, Terrence is some of his videos are funny, but this one I think is like the real focus is on Beto. Beto O'Rourke is someone who's never had any experience managing anything. I think maybe he managed his mom's furniture store or whatever the hell it was, but we're not talking about someone who has the composure to deal with crisis. Look at his reaction to these press reporters on something like this.
He's been calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals. I don't know, like members of the press. What the? Hold on a second. You know, it's these.
So this type of reaction is not something that shows composure. It doesn't show poise. It doesn't show an ability to just react with a cool head and assess the scene. Now, I don't know if you could say President Obama had the perfect reaction to everything, but President Obama was a cool customer when it came to reacting to the media and talking to the press. Usually, I have heard that at one point he did freak out at a reporter one time and told them to, you know, that the interview is over. But in general, you wouldn't see even President Obama react this way to the press. And you can see that he's losing control. It's not the same thing with Donald Trump at his news conferences, where he seems to be able to play the media like a fiddle. So we're ending this. We're going into this debate right now about firearms and about Second Amendment and the laws, and you're having people who can't even keep a cool head, and they are supposed to be projecting leadership. I don't think that's the way it is. And yes, it's understandable because O'Rourke is from El Paso that he would have a bit of, you know, he would have an emotional reaction. I don't know if he knew anybody from the attack, in which case, you know, I'd have to say condolences to Beto. But the general problem that we're talking about here is that we have politicians like O'Rourke who have not had administrative experience. They've never had management experience, so they can't cope. They can't deal with issues that are extremely stressful to them. O'Rourke had previously served as a city council member in El Paso, and then, of course, he was a member of Congress for a few years. And you can just see in his debate performances and in his appearances with the media that he has this docile and very passive demeanor. I mean, you can just see here, you know, he's
been calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals. I don't know, like members of the press. What the? Hold on a second. You know, it's these.
So he can't react very crisply because he's never had this situation where he's put on the spot, because he's usually the person asking the questions. He's usually on a panel as part of the city council, as a representative in Congress. And think about it this way. They don't have any accountability. So he's not proposing any solution. He's not really giving any wisdom on the situation. And that's really the general pattern you're going to see here with the Democrats. It's the same thing going to happen. This is something I was reading before with Kamala Harris, where they're already asking, Nate Silver is asking, is the field too big for Kamala Harris? Which would be a little, you know, not to dirty the conversation too much, but not often are things being called too big for Kamala Harris. But they are preparing the damage control for the fact that her numbers are just going to keep tumbling, and you're going to see a lot of her supporters flow over to one of the other candidates. Likely, in my opinion, most of her voters will go over to Warren, possibly Buttigieg, maybe even, and this is a real irony, it might be that Harris voters are going to flow over to Joe Biden. So really what we're talking about right now is people who are trying to harness this tragedy in order to garner more votes. But in the long term, it doesn't help. Uh, One of the reasons it's not going to help is because in the general election, you're not going to want people who have excessively draconian laws, whatever the issue is, whether it's not doesn't have to be just with regards to the Second Amendment and firearms. It could be laws regarding transactions. It could be laws regarding use of land. If somebody's going to come in and say, well, we're not going to let you use your land for anything, the environment and climate change and blah blah blah, people are not going to vote for you. People do not want any extremist on any issue. So when you're talking about gun control, there's a lot of voices that are out there. Reza Aslan is going nuts right now. He said, I think that Trump and Trump supporters need to be eradicated. That's the reaction that a lot of people are going to remember. And my advice to people, I saw Bill Mitchell and I saw a lot of people start to crumble on this issue. They're cracking under the pressure. And what they really should do is ignore these idiots that are calling for more laws and more gun control. All you have to do is let them wait it out, and eventually they will go way too far, and people are going to realize that they're too crazy to take seriously. It happened to Beto O'Rourke today. Maybe he'll receive a little bump in the poll ahead of the next debate, but I guarantee you that by the time of the next debate, it's not really going to help. He's going to get on that stage. He's going to really make a fool out of himself during that debate, and then his numbers are going to plummet again. And with respect to Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, who's another of these hyperbolic people, Gillibrand, Klobuchar is going to have to give it a try. All these candidates who need to remain relevant, de Blasio, they're going to have to unveil their own gun control plan, which is not really a plan. It's going to be a lot of virtue signaling and heavy-handed nonsense. They're going to try to use these two tragedies as a means to climb in the polls, and I don't think it's going to work. I think, in fact, it's likely going to help only one candidate, and that candidate is Joe Biden, because Joe Biden on the Democratic side is the symbol of stability. He's the symbol of being that I guess the candle in the wind, or more likely, the tree with the strong roots in the wind, right? But we all know that a certain buzzsaw is coming for that tree next year, and it's called old age. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds, as well as donating on Subscribestar. My screen name on all those is @ChefLeopard. And you can also find me on Gab @Starscream85. I'll talk to you later.